What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the 3 of 7 podcast. Well, we got a bunch of stuff to talk about today. First of all, I've been a little antsy here lately. I'm trying to explain to my wife last night when I was just hanging out around the house. You know, I'm trying to explain this to her, and we could do a whole podcast on just this. But literally, I have spent my entire adult life training and fighting as a warrior. Like, they literally took me and warped my mind, reshaped my mind into this thing that is a warrior, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, sometimes as a warrior, you just want to fight something. You want to have something to fight against, right? This don't make sense to a lot of people, but if you have that warrior mind that has been like formed within you through this process that was SEAL training for me personally, if I don't have something to strive against, I'll go crazy, man. I got to have something to strive against.
You want to take some anger out, though.
Look, man, I'm ready to.
You ain't wanting to strive against something. You wanting to actually put some damage on something.
Well, I'm like, dude, that's just the way it is.
You better not come around here bowing up on me.
You've seen a little agitated lately.
Well,
agitated?
I'll tell you, man,
I'll tell you what. I'm always ready to go. You better not be bowing up around me.
I know. You done whooped me once. Well,
tone it down, son.
Look, man, we got a lot to talk about today. The meat of this podcast is going to be talking about, essentially, from a biblical perspective, when should you consider not submitting to the requests of your government. All right, so this is going to come from a couple different places in the Bible, but we'll start in Romans chapter 13. And the reason that we're even talking about this is because we did an episode just a little while back called Masking the Image of God, which is all, it was all about the mask mandates. I understand that you guys are sick and tired of hearing about the mask stuff. But the reason that we're talking about it now is because I think that we're deep enough into this whole situation that we can actually have a conversation about it without freaking pissing half the world off, right? So we can have a nice conversation about this and talk through it and look at it from a biblical perspective and come to some conclusions based around this scenario that we've all been living in for the last year. So everybody settled down a little bit. That's why we're talking about it right now. But when we did that episode, which wasn't a very popular episode, by the way, again, I think people are still a little bit offended by some stuff. But one of our good friends, PJ, sent us an email, and I'll read through that email here in just a little bit. But essentially, PJ was saying, well, whatever. I'll read you the email. He was asking, hey, when these mandates come down, what about Romans 13? And so that's what we're going to talk through.
Well, mask is what spurred this, but it can be applied to other things that the government, other mandates that they put in place. So this is not another mask video.
No.
This is about submission to your government. When is it okay to disobey, and when are you to obey?
That's right. Yeah. And yeah, it can apply to broad spectrum things of what the powers that be are asking you to do. So that's the truth. All right. That's what today's episode's about for a little bit. A lot of things are changing at 3 of 7 Project. Okay. So I'm going to bring you guys up to speed real quick. We've got Instructor Chili on the pod right now. I'm hoping that Instructor Chili is going to be full-time with 3 of 7 Project after today. I'm assuming that, Chili, are you going to be full-time after today?
He's hoping you're going to be after today.
Well, that's the plan, man. That's the plan.
You're probably hoping you're gonna be too, huh?
Yeah.
We haven't really. We had this is our first meeting. So yeah,
We figured we'd do it live here on the podcast,
Yeah.
y'all.
so we're bringing Instructor Chili on full time to take care of some pretty important aspects of 307 Project and also integrate into everything that we do. So welcome, Instructor Chili.
Thank you.
You
Thank
guys are going to be hearing Instructor Chili on the podcast, Lord willing, every Wednesday. You guys, you're going to take over the apparel side of the house, right?
Yes, sir. Looking forward to it.
So he's taking,
Already started.
Yeah, he's already got that up and running. We're bringing apparel back in house. We're going to do a lot of fun stuff with it. All right.
And what we're looking to do is what you want. We've got what we think is good ideas, but we want to hear from you and hear what you want and what you would like to improve. And then we'll try to get that done.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about Instructor Chili real quick and why we brought him on. Here we go. I'm just looking here. You done signed up for a darn another race, Instructor Chili.
Did you?
Yep, I'm looking right here.
I
All
was
right,
keeping that on the down low.
let me tell y'all something about Instructor Chili. Here we go. Endless Mile, 6 hours. Overall placement, first place, 47 miles in 6 hours. Blue Ridge Ultra, first place. Stump Jump, fourth place. Lady of the Lake, 8 hours, first place. Rebecca Mountain 50 miler, first place. Ridge to Blazing Trail Race, overall, first place. Fort Frenzy Ultra Festival, first place. Fort Frenzy Ultra Festival 6 hour, first place. Merrill's Mile 24-hour race, second place, 124.76 miles in 24 hours. Mid-State Mile, fifth place. River Gorge Trail Race, seventh. Mass Execution Elimination Endurance Challenge, 12 hours, first place. Fort Yargo Ultra, first place. Memorial Day Trail Run, first place. Sweetwater H2O, first place. Rabid Raccoon, first place. Stump Jump, 10th place. Georgia Jewel, first place in course record. Still Hollow Trail Race, second place. Chattanooga Mountain Stage Race, first place. Chattanooga Mountain Stage Race, all stages, first place. River Gorge Trail Race, fourth place. All right. That's why we're bringing Instructor Chili on, son.
Well, it goes much beyond he wins a lot of races.
That's one of the reasons. I'm saying that's where he has proven that he's willing to put in the freaking work to be a winner. And, look, when I look at a brother or a sister, their physical build, and I look at this resume here, right? This is physical stuff running. But it tells me a lot about a person's freaking mindset. Mm-hmm. All right? If you're going to perform at this level, if you're going to perform at this level, it tells me something about your mindset. All right? Chili's got not only great physical ability, very strong mindset, but he also has a solid foundation in Jesus. All right. So he's the director of prophecy here at 307 Project. He runs the apparel side of the house. There ain't no telling what else he's going to do. All right. So there we go. Welcome, Instructor Chili.
Hey, like I said, I'm excited.
We're never going to say your name on the podcast, by the way. Don't tell people.
You've already said it 3 times, Chili.
Yeah. We're never going to reveal his real identity.
I was laying down with Blakely the other night, and I said, we got Chili coming out tomorrow now. And she said, that's a funny name. What's his other name? I said, Cochran, Chili Cochran. And she said, no, I mean, like, what's his other name?
What's his Christian name?
I said, that's it, baby. It's Chili Cochran.
Yeah, I don't know why people are always looking for something else. What's wrong with Chili?
Ain't nothing wrong with it, man. Not in my book. So we're thankful. We're so thankful to be bringing Instructor Chili on board, and I hope you guys enjoy getting to know him. I wanted to let y'all know about that. I want to also let y'all know about YouTube. We're filming these podcasts and putting them on YouTube, and me and Instructor Chili are going to sit down after this conversation and film a special video for you guys, and we're going to put it on YouTube, and it's going to be all about running shoes, because that's probably the number one question that I get from people is what shoes to run in. So we're about to sit down and film a video for you guys that will be the last video you will ever have to watch about running shoes. And this is a no bullcrap video because we're not sponsored by any running shoe company. So we're going to tell you the good and the bad and the ugly and what we've settled in on as far as running shoes goes. So go check us out on YouTube. Just search 3 of 7 Project. It's a YouTube channel. Subscribe, watch the podcast, watch the videos we're going to start having out for you guys. We'll try to do about 1 a week. We'll try to. No promises there, but that's what we're going to try to hit. Not only the podcast, but with like special type gear review type stuff.
Podcast be 2 a week.
Yeah, the podcast is 2 a week. We've got Evan editing our video now with Your Social Gathering. Thank you, Evan. Check him out on Instagram. Join us on Patreon if you want to get in on Resurrected. It's my favorite thing that I do is Resurrected. The link's in the show notes of this episode. All right. It's a lot of stuff. Before we start talking about Romans 13, I'm going to give you guys, I might start doing a special segment in these comm checks where I call out some bull crap that I see. And I'm going to let, if y'all see some bull crap, we'll have a little call out segment. All right? I'm going to call this out because you know why? If y'all can't tell, man, I'm amped up today. I done had 2 cups of coffee.
You are, son.
Look, I'm about to call, I am sick and tired of what quote unquote influencers that spew a bunch of bull crap out into the world, and people go and turn to them and act like what they're saying is legit. All right? So here's your little call out section today. And I talked about, so if you're an influencer and you're listening to this podcast, don't talk a bunch of bull crap because I'm going to call you out. All right? This is what I heard last week. And I talked about this on Resurrected. There's a dude, this just like populated on my my podcast feed. There's some dude named Jordan Peterson. He has a massive podcast. He's some kind of psychologist, scientist type of head. You know what I mean? Sounds super intelligent. And so I'm looking at this episode. The episode is titled Christianity in the Modern World. And he's having a conversation with one of the leaders of the Catholic Church named Bishop Barron. All right? Leader in the Catholic Church. And this Jordan Peterson, his podcast is huge, man. Whatever. I'm just saying a lot of people are listening to this dude and trying to glean wisdom from him. And maybe he has a lot of wisdom to offer if we can get him off the topic of Bible, all right? But also this guy, Bishop Barron, a leader in the Catholic Church, which is, so every Catholic tells me they're Christian. I don't even understand. The Catholic Church is mind-boggling to me. But I'm thinking, well, maybe I can gain some insight from this guy and see what they got to say. And I'm listening to this podcast, and I realized very quickly that this guy, Jordan Peterson, and this guy, Barron Bishop, are so, I don't know if smart or intelligent is the word for it. Maybe it is. They're so educated, they're so intelligent that they have become dumb. It was blatantly obvious after what it is they cannot take anything at face value. They can no longer see the truth on the surface of any. They can't take anything just as truth, right? Because they're so intelligent, they think there's got to be a deeper meaning or a deeper cause of this. And it's like, no, some things you just take at face value as truth, right? And I'm thinking, as I go through this, I'm thinking about Romans 1, verse 22, they are professing themselves to be wise, but they have become fools, literally. And then as we go through 2 Timothy, we talk about in 2 Timothy, we talk about what does 2 Timothy say about, gosh, I just lost it. We talked about it on Resurrected. But essentially, professing to be wise, they have become fools. I'll have to look up 2 Timothy for y'all here in just a second.
Was it when everyone was out in the streets babbling and he goes out and says, "Are you drunk?"
No. 2 Timothy was Paul talking to Timothy about, hold on, just let me look it up for you guys real quick. I know you guys didn't listen to this podcast. Let me look this up for you guys real quick.
Well, and you talk about them being so wise they've become fools, and I think it goes back to overcomplicating things. Like, you start digging and looking for something that's not there, you're just spinning your tires and complicating it.
Okay, here we go. Yeah. Ever learning, and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. That's what these guys are doing. They're always learning, but they're never able to come to the knowledge of the truth because they can't take anything at face value. Mm-hmm. And in most cases, truth is simple. It has to be simple so that every human being can understand it.
Yeah.
All right? And then moving on in 2 Timothy, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust they shall heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. Okay, as I listen to this podcast with these heads, they proceed to compare the Bible with other historical writings such as Shakespeare and Hamlet and many others. They're literally making direct comparisons, saying that Shakespeare's writings contain just as much truth and wisdom as the biblical, the canon, all right, the biblical text. Mm-hmm. And it's like, hold on, dude. You cannot compare this book to any other writing on earth. And if you do, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. Yeah. All right. They go on to say again, this really blew me away. Of course, since they're they can't see the truth, they go on to start discussing evolutionary theory, and I did not know this, but the Catholic Church has now accepted the basic tenets of the evolutionary theory.
Is that what the bishop was saying on there?
Yeah, they both agreed on that. I mean, Jordan Peterson comes out and says, hey, this is coming from the Pope, right? Like, the Pope says that the Catholic Church, or has said the Catholic Church has accepted the basic tenets of the evolutionary theory. And this Bishop Barron says, oh, yeah, of course he has. Yeah. Well, look. These guys are having a biblical conversation talking about the correlation between Christianity and the modern world, and they start the conversation with saying that they both accept the tenets of the evolutionary theory. The conversation should have stopped right there.
Yeah.
They know they can no longer proceed with any conversation revolving around biblical truth.
No, because if Genesis isn't true, the rest of it's not true.
That's right.
It's either all true or none of it's true. Yeah. That's it.
So if these cats right here, you're starting off telling me the first 4 or 5 verses of the Bible are just a fable, basically, then how are you going to proceed with any other conversation about the Bible?
You've just created your own religion. Is what you've done.
Exactly.
If you take anything out of the book and say, no, this isn't absolute truth, then none of it's absolute truth. You can't say some of it is and some of it's not.
That's right.
Well, that's an interesting discussion because, I mean, the array of people that I've listened to what they had to say. You know, I mean, it includes Jordan Peterson. I've listened to many podcasts. I've listened to the exact one you're talking about. I don't know if you knew that, and you know, I found it interesting that because Jordan Peterson does not claim to be a Christian, but obviously Bishop Barron does, and he's a high-level figure in the Catholic Church. And, you know, it was funny the way that conversation was framed because Jordan Peterson seems like somebody who's really searching and is really trying to, you know, like you said, he's thinking a lot. And to me, I view him as a person who is not, he doesn't claim to be a Christian, but is trying to, he's searching. Like many people in this world, he's searching and he's close, but he can't let go of certain things, right? And he can't, and that, you know, it was so frustrating to me that he had somebody on that could have helped frame it and helped him maybe understand, but instead that guy was
he fed him some bull crap.
Because Jordan Peterson, I know why he had some stuff wrong, right? Because he doesn't even claim to be a Christian. But what really frustrated me was Bishop Barron, you know, who is this high-level figure, Christian figure. A lot of people listen to him as well. And then he just led him down even a worse, you know, a more confusing path. So, and also did that with the millions of people watching. So I was really frustrated with that.
They might as well be listening to Bishop Bullwinkle.
Bishop Bullwinkle. If y'all ain't seen that, y'all gotta go check that out on YouTube. No, I agree with you. Chili. And I want to tell you as the listener, if you are already a Christian, but you are trying to make some concession to if you are trying to make some excuse that to basically sync up the theory of evolution with the biblical account of creation, right? There's all kinds of things out there, the gap theory, the day age theory, all this stuff. No. Like, just if you are struggling with the dynamic of the account of creation in the Bible, you need to please stop whatever you're studying right now and turn and start studying that and get that right in your mind, okay? Because there is in my opinion, overwhelming amount of evidence that will point you in the direction of the biblical account of creation. Literal 6-day creation. All right? Now, you're not going to find this stuff in the mainstream. All right? You need to look for the science because guess what? The evolution is mainstream. They want to bury any evidence that points to the literal creation account in the Bible. They want to bury that, right?
It's not going to be the first link on Google.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So let me recommend some books for you. 2 books I'm reading right now. Just continuously study them more so than read them. Both are written by Henry Morris. One is called The Long War Against God. The other one is called Defending the Faith. Defending the Faith. Both of those are wonderful books that are going to help you work through this in your mind because you have to get the first part right in this book that God wrote to us in order to get anything from the rest of it. You really do. I mean, Jesus started with Genesis. Like when he would share about God, he started in Genesis and went all the way up through, right, in his own ministry. And likewise, we should start at Genesis. So anyways, I just had to call that freaking conversation out because it was so ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I could hear when these guys would go down these rabbit holes because they, again, couldn't take anything at face value. I could understand where they were they were literally trying to make the case that people who commit suicide are actually seeking the best thing for them. They're actually seeking good. I'm like, huh, this is insane. This is insane conversation. Like, I can see where you're trying to go, like, but you're way overthinking everything.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I don't know how many hours I've spent in my life, through my background of growing up as a Christian, basically since I was, obviously you're not born a Christian, but I mean, it was basically that way. That's just how I grew up. But just over the years, searching different things, and I wanted to not study other things just for no reason, but to study it to be able to defend the faith. That's part of apologetics is knowing what people who don't believe like you believe, so you can defend your faith. I mean, that's part of it. I think it's important to know what other people believe, and there's millions of other theories out there about everything. But so I've listened to plenty of people, and Jordan Peterson included, and that's what was so frustrating to me about that episode was, like I said, he is clearly a guy who has helped many people in other ways, right? I mean, his advice isn't grounded in the Bible, but other people have been helped. I mean, that's a complicated issue of can someone who's not a Christian actually help other people? I mean, he's helped them, accomplish certain things in their life. I mean, it's millions of people. It's crazy, that he has such a following.
You can. Let me just interject there.
Yeah.
You're going to serve God, and you're either going to serve him willingly or you're not going to, or you're going to serve him not willingly. I mean, but he's going to use you for the good.
Yeah, I mean, that's my opinion too, is you can help people in other ways, but it just is not rooted in the, but regardless, he is someone who's searching, and I think if he could get this figured out, it would help him help even more people and in the right way. But he had someone on who was a Christian and like warped his mind even more. It was such a frustrating thing. And a lot of that does come from, this gets controversial, but I don't shy away from that. Is coming from the Pope in the Catholic Church, which there's a lot of problems. And I would advise anybody to examine what is coming out of any leader's, influencer's mouth, whether they profess to be a Christian or not.
Yeah.
And that includes leaders in the church who, maybe millions of people think are an elevated figure. It's important to listen to what they say. And sometimes there are people who are in those positions that will say things that do not line up with what you read in the Bible. Just because they're in that position doesn't mean they get the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Well,
a good pastor, teacher, anything will say, don't take my word for it.
Right.
Go do the research for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. There's your call out for today. And, I also encourage any of you guys to call me out. All right. We're going to, I think it's high time I started calling these freaking cats out. So hey, call me out, man. If I say something that's freaking out of whack, go for it. You're going to help me grow.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm not trying to be mean here.
Yeah, we don't all know everything.
No,
that's
heck no.
kind of and never will either.
That's it, man. All right, we're about to dig into Romans 13. Want to let you guys know we've had 2 brothers get saved, accept Jesus, and be baptized within the last 4 or 5 days. So we're taking back ground. I just want to make a proclamation that there's a bunch of rednecks in a place called Rome, Georgia, that's taking ground, son. We're taking back ground. I'm going to go ahead and tell you. So I'm just making that proclamation. We ain't messing around. All right, I'll leave it at that. This episode was brought to you by Wazoo Survival Gear. If you don't know about Wazoo Survival Gear, you need to go in the show notes, click the link to their website, and check out their products. It's wearable survival gear. We use it every month on the basic course in the wilderness.
Shoot, I use it every day.
We use it every day. They've got the cash cap, which is a hat that you can put a bunch of stuff in, like little zip ties, like a little compass, keys,
cards, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, this stuff is very, very unique. It works. I've got my bushcraft bracelet on right now. It's a really awesome leather bracelet with a ferro rod attached to it, bushcraft necklace. So we use this stuff every day. We love Wazoo survival gear. If you want to extend your capabilities and you want to be more prepared for whatever life throws at you, go check Wazoo out. And yeah, they're going to have something you like. They've given us a pro code for 3-7 podcast listeners. It'll be in the show notes of this episode. That'll give you 20% off your orders from Wazoo. You can only find that at 3-7 podcast. So thank you, Wazoo, for sponsoring this episode. All right, here we go with Romans 13. I'll just go ahead and read it so you guys know what we're talking about here, and then we'll see where the conversation goes. I think this is really important because as we continue on down the path that we're continuing on here in the United States of America and in the first world as a whole, I think this is going to be something that we need to be conscious of, and we need to know how to deal with it. All right, Romans 13, submission to authorities, starts here. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he, the ruler, is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou that do that which is evil, be afraid. For he that beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that does evil. All right, so that's pretty much the basis of Romans 13. We stopped at chapter 5. We'll go ahead and start to break this down. Again, we're talking about submitting to authorities. And why are we talking about this? Because the authorities are getting awfully controlling these days. And there's a lot of laws and mandates and things coming down that we may not necessarily agree with, and especially as Christians. So where do you draw the line? You know, for me, as I read through this text, I see the first part, and it sounds really scary. The first part, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained by God. Now, if it stopped right there, that'd be pretty hard to swallow. Because I'm thinking of like Hitler and the Third Reich. Like, if it stopped right there, where do you go from there? You know what I mean? But the beautiful part about this, in my mind, as you continue to read through this, you have the realization that, in my opinion, and I want to hear you guys' opinion on it too, as you read through this, the part that really makes it not so scary is I realize, starting in verse 3, that Paul is talking about righteous governments or righteous mandates. As he says, for rulers are not a terror to good works. So here he's talking about rulers, these rulers that he's talking about in the first two verses. These rulers are not a terror to good works. All right? So these are rulers that are trying to promote good things, but they are terrors to evil. So these are righteous rulers Paul is talking about. Will thou then not be afraid of power? do that which is good, and you shall have praise of the same. In other words, he goes on continuously and says, if you are a good person, you're not going to have any issues with these good rulers, right? For these good rulers he's talking about, they are the minister of God to thee for good. So in other words, they're there to uphold the good. But if you do that which is evil, you should be afraid because a good ruler doesn't bear the sword in vain. He is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that does evil. So, because of that second portion of Paul's instruction, of God's instruction, I see that in my mind, the dynamic here is not saying submit yourself to a tyrant, a communist, a government that's asking you to do something against the will of God, but is asking you to obey a government that is promoting goodness and morality and to uphold a biblical standard. What do you guys think about that?
You want to go?
There is, I was talking to Paul a while the other day about this a little bit. And so to go back and you think about submission, and we read in Genesis 1:26 where God is giving us dominion over the flesh of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. But it doesn't say anything about humans in there, right? We don't have dominion over other humans. So in order for authority to be in place, there has to be submission, right? Or else there is no authority without submission. And so God has put authority in places with the government, within the church, within a family. The father is the authority, and it takes a submission of a wife in order to have that authority. So there is structure in place, and without submission, there is no authority. And it goes back to the chain of command we talk about all the time, and that's essentially, to me, what it is. So I think submission to your government, we read in Romans 13, is right. I thought that was an interesting take that Paul had on that when he was telling me about it. Without submission, there is no authority. So I want to lay that out. But I think that, I wish I'd have wrote it down, but I was reading on this, and in the Old Testament, there's a story where God was using basically an evil ruler to inflict pain on, or, whatever, on his people who were being disobedient. So in that case, this is a rhetorical question, but was it okay for the people to rise up against and fight that because God had put that in place purposely? So he had put a tyrannical ruler in place. And now this is Old Testament stuff, so you can dig into that more. But I'm just playing the devil's advocate there. No,
I've thought a lot about this for years, because this verse is often used as a battering ram by people who are, maybe you'd say, naturally more inclined to submit to government authority. I'm a person who that would not be the case for.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm a person who is naturally, I would say, rebellious, but I would say not wanting to just lay down when I disagree with something, right? So this portion of the Bible was used when America was founded, right? Because it was like, King George in England just keep, you see what this verse is saying? It's saying submit to the government. You don't need to try to leave and make a better life for yourself. And that's interesting. So I'm always really careful when I read stuff. I don't want to make it say what I want it to say.
I had to do the same. When I was studying this, I thought I had to stop myself because I was looking for things that would make it okay for me to say, you don't have to listen.
Right. Me too. So that's why it's real hard. But so what I like to study is, I'm by no means a expert in the Greek language or linguistics, but I've studied some of that, and the what's so funny is in Romans 13:1, the word that sticks out to me is be subject to, right? Or submit, whatever your translation says.
Be subject to the government.
Well, the original Greek, this was written by Paul, right? And the original Greek of that word, I'll butcher the pronunciation, but is hypotasso, okay? And that essentially means maintain order, avoid chaos, okay? And so I think of another word in the Bible that is maybe similar to that, and you go look at Ephesians 6 where it talks about children, obey your parents. And that word is, once again, hypokuo. Okay, it's real similar, right? And that literally means obey. It means do what they tell you to do. Okay, and it's also using another verses talking about obey God. And I thought about, why didn't Paul use that word? Why didn't he use the word that meant obey? Well, because I don't think he meant obey everything that they say. I don't think he meant that. I think he meant be subject to, maintain order. The context around this verse is Paul literally had just escaped prison.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of interesting, to escape prison and then go be subject to governing authorities, right? I mean, I think that's interesting. Peter, later in the Bible, does this exact same thing. He literally escapes his chains and then goes and writes a similar letter, okay? And so what I think, once again, I'm trying not to make it just say what I want it to say, but because of that distinction, I think what Paul is saying is, when you determine that the governing authorities are trying to get you to do something that goes against God's commands, you should not do what it says. You shouldn't do it. But you should accept the consequences for those actions. Because God has put all rulers in place, whether they're good or bad. Because there's not many good rulers, in my opinion, actually. There's a lot of bad ones. And there's some people who maybe you would say are a good ruler, but they do bad things at times. Nobody's perfect, right? So I think what he's saying is there's rulers that have told people throughout history to go worship me, or go worship themselves, go worship this idol. You shouldn't do that. But those leaders have been put in place by God, and they have their rules. And if you don't obey what they want you to do, you may face punishment. And I think that's what be subject to is. It's to maintain the order, avoid chaos. You're going to have to, in this life, it's not going to be so easy. You may not do what a leader tells you to do because it goes against what God's commands are, and you may be killed for it.
Yeah.
You may be put in prison.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And that's part of it. That's part of God's will, God's plan. And you have to be willing to accept that if you want to live out what God's commands are. That's how I view this passage. So,
I like that. I really like that a lot, Noah. And you brought up a lot of good points. Oh crap. I really like that a lot, Chili. I'll have to edit that out. And so that's exactly what happened to Daniel when King Nebuchadnezzar asked Daniel and to worship him, and he said no, and and then let's look at Peter in particular in Acts. How did he respond? Let's look at this since you brought that up. Peter is basically standing before the high priest, which was the government that was in charge of the Jewish people during this time. In Acts, the high priest says, "Did we not strictly command you that you should not teach in this name," that being Jesus' name, "and behold, you have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine and intend to bring this man's blood upon us," Jesus' blood upon us. Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, "We ought to obey God rather than men." Interesting. "The God of our fathers raised up Jesus, whom ye slew and hanged on a tree." So Peter tells them directly when they say, "We told you not to teach this." He says, well, in this case, since you're telling me to do something, to obey a rule or a law that is against what Jesus said, no, in this case, we're going to obey Jesus instead of you. and then he throws it right back on them. But the interesting thing is, going back to what Noah said, Peter did this, but he was more than, oh man, I said it again. Peter did this, but he was more than willing, quite obviously, to accept the consequences of his actions. And was it not Peter? Was it not Peter who was in the Garden of Gethsemane when the religious people came to seize Jesus? Was it not Peter who took a sword out and cut the ear off of one of the soldiers?
I think it was, yeah.
And Jesus, what did Jesus tell him? Said,
Put your sword
up, man.
This is how it's got to be.
That's right. And so the entire life, even in ministry of Jesus, he was obviously going against what the rulers and authorities were telling him to do. Mm-hmm. That's why they crucified him, right? So he was going against it, but he was more than willing to take the punishment and essentially become a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Which is what all of the apostles had to do also. So all of the apostles throughout their ministry, they were disobeying their governments, right? Because not only the Roman government, because the Roman government viewed Caesar as essentially their god or their king, right? Mm-hmm. And the disciples are saying, no, you're not, Caesar, you're not the king. And then also defying the Jewish rulers. So they were defying both sets of authorities that were in charge in their time directly. But they were willing to accept the price of that. And that's interesting.
Where I arrived on this was that I said that God had put the authorities in place to do things. So, as far as it pertains to Christianity, why is the government put in place here? And it's not to spread the gospel; it's to create an environment to where we can
function as a society.
Where we can function, we can meet, we can worship God. And when that is no longer, when the reason that God put that authority in place is no longer serving the purpose that he put it there for, then I think you might have some grounds. And what I arrived at was when disobedience to your government displays submission to Jesus, I think it's okay. When those two rub together, if your disobedience to what the government's telling you to do displays obedience to the Bible, then I think you got grounds for it. And God shows us plenty of passages in the Scripture where he blesses that. Let's look at Acts, where you just talked about, when they said, no, we can't do that. What happens? The government says, well, we really don't have any grounds to do anything to these guys. God blesses that they stood up for them because nothing happened to them. We look in Daniel 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refuse to bow down to the king in their time, and he says, whatever you want to do, we're not going to do it. He throws them in the fire, and God blesses their disobedience, throws them in the fire, and they come out without even a singed hair or the stench of smoke on them.
Yeah.
And then Daniel 6, Daniel in the lion's den. He doesn't get eaten by the lion. I mean, there's countless ones. In Exodus, the midwives where they won't kill the baby that's born, and they buck what the government's telling them to do. There's plenty of examples where disobedience to the government displays submission to God, and he blesses it.
That's it, man. That's it. I like that a lot, man. And this commentary in my study Bible kind of goes right along with this. Just the commentary on 13, chapter 1 here in Romans that we're studying. God commands Christians to obey the state, for the state as an institution is ordained and established by God. God has instituted government because in this fallen world, we need certain restraints in order to protect us from the chaos and lawlessness, what Noah mentioned earlier, that is a natural result of sin. The civil government as The civil government, as does all of life, stands under the law of God. God has ordained the state to be an agent of justice to restrain evil by punishing the wrongdoer and protect the good of society. Paul describes government as it should be, which is what I was talking about in the very beginning. When it abandons its proper function, it is no longer from God nor operating according to his purpose.
Yeah.
For example, when the state requires something contrary to the word of God, Christians must obey God rather than the other humans. I like what Noah said, but also be willing to accept whatever comes down. It is, commentary goes on to say, it's the duty of all believers to pray for those in authority. So there's one other place in the Bible where this same topic is brought up, and we'll look at that real quick. That is in 1 Peter chapter 2, starting in verse 13. Here we go. Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors, as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers. There we go. Again, we see government that is functioning in its proper manner. All right? And for the praise of them who do well. So here, again, if it would have stopped at verse 13, submit yourself to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme. If it stopped right there, that's tough. But at 14, it says, or as governors, as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and to the praise of them that do well. Again, that points me back to the fact, Peter here is talking about governments that are functioning properly. All right? I don't know. That's again, I'm going back to the point I made first right off the bat. So a lot of good stuff in that conversation that you guys can chew on. I think a lot of truth in there.
I think that kind of hits the nail on the head. What Noah said is you still have to recognize the authority. If you're going to, God shows it's okay to be disobedient, accept the punishment that they're giving, which is recognizing the authority. Hey, I recognize that you've got authority here, and I recognize I've been obedient. Do what you got to do, but don't pull out your sword and cut the dude's ear off.
Well, the model would be Christ, right? How he accepted death on the cross. So that would be the model. Is he was a blameless man, but still was subject under that. That was obviously what had to be done, and I think it's actually good to mention the fact that God, when he blesses you, when you actually disobey the government because you're obeying God, and he brings you out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And he will do that, but there's also going to come a point where that may not happen, right? That's not his plan. Your plan is to accept whatever it may be, and then that's the end of your life, and you go to be with God in heaven. That's so you don't know what the outcome will be.
I think God put those stories in the Bible to say, I accept that it's okay to disobey the government on my behalf. I don't think he put those in there to say, I'm going to deliver you from the punishment you might receive every time.
Right.
I think he put it in there to show that he blesses that decision.
Well, going back to those examples that you gave, Blake, the birth of our nation is an exact example of one of the biblical accounts that you gave. We as a nation decided to take up arms against a unrighteous and tyrannical government, and God decided to bless this nation, and now we are America, although we do not resemble the government at all that was founded in the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, and that goes back to the implications of your choice to blindly follow the government, even when it goes against what God is saying. That's impactful when you do that. That's a problem. So this is not just saying that, you have to be, I don't know. It's just, it's very important that when instructions from the government or laws or mandates come from the government that go against what God says, it's actually imperative that you do not do what the government is telling you to do, or the state, or whatever you'd like to say, any earthly power. It's actually imperative that you disobey when it goes against what God is saying.
That I found this on online. This guy named Sam Storms talks a lot about this, and he says, armed revolution is justified only if the state has become totally opposed to the purpose for which God ordained it, and if there is no other recourse available to prevent massive evil. I think that's pretty good.
And that can be hard for a people to determine when that is.
That's
right?
it. That's a judgment call.
That is hard to determine exactly when that is, because some people would say, hey, it's time for that now in America. Or, it was time 10 years ago in America, or it's going to be time in 10 years from now. But, when is it too late? When is it too early? When is it? That's a hard judgment call to make. And that's why, to the best of your ability, you don't make that yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree with that. And, this is one of the things that I just wanted to go. How does this apply to us now in real time here? I think we can all think of scenarios, and I think we also need to. I acknowledge the fact that there is no government that is completely righteous. That will only happen when Jesus Christ establishes his kingdom. All right? So, but finding that line, like Noah's talking about, it's extremely tough, especially for me personally, again, as a warrior, a freedom fighter, someone that has trained and went out and executed actual missions against governments that were evil, right? And where does our government stand in the light of righteousness as far as the culture that we are in right now? And I look at it, and I as you assess the state of our nation, our government right now, man, it's just when you look at the totality of it. First of all, we as a government, we have driven Jesus out of every aspect of culture, every single aspect of culture that here in America. I don't care if you talk about God. The government officials, presidents, politicians, they like to use the word God, right? Because God is a general term.
Yep.
God could mean Allah. God could mean
Poseidon.
God could mean anything. They have intentionally driven Jesus out of every aspect of culture. Why? Because Jesus is the cornerstone. He is exclusive, right?
Yeah, when you come across Jesus, it causes some problems.
That's right.
You got to figure something out.
I look at what is our government using our resources, our taxes. All right, look, man, I've looked up an article. This was in 2015. This was a Forbes article. So this is 6 years ago. It's hard to find any data on this stuff, obviously, because if an unrighteous government is using tax dollars to support unrighteous acts, they're not going to publicize it, right? It's really hard to find. I find this one data from an article 6 years old. It says, the writer says, as best as I can determine, taxpayers subsidize roughly 24% of all abortion costs in the U.S. 6.6% is borne by the federal taxpayers, and the remaining 17.4% is picked up by state taxpayers. If we apply the 24% figure to the total number of abortions, this is the equivalent to taxpayers paying the full cost of 250,000 abortions per year. So our government is using our money. This was 6 years ago, to murder 250,000 unborn or born children.
Which that happens, by the way. I don't know if people know that, but
this is, yeah, I mean, this,
Yeah.
this is like, holy crap, man. You know, and this is just a very, I mean, we could go on and on about this. Where does our government stand in righteousness? But I want to bring it down to, is what your government is asking you to do right now against biblical standards or biblical morality? Is it on certain topics that are front and center? This is the thing with the whole mask thing. In order for us to make a determination of whether or not we should obey these mandates, like this one, just using it as a particular example, can you make a case that this mandate to mask your face is against a biblical standard? In my opinion, I can make a case that masking your face is against a biblical standard. I think I can make a case for that biblically, okay? How about not meeting as a congregation? I think I can make a case that the body of Christ, that the government sending a mandate down saying that the body of Christ cannot meet, I can make a case that that is biblically like anti-biblical standards, right? How about not praising God by singing praise? Mm-hmm. All right. I can make a case that that is not biblical.
Which that has been passed down, right? Some church out in California, or maybe more churches out in California, they could meet, but they couldn't sing. Who was it that was telling us that?
oh, I mean,
Oh no, this is common knowledge.
Yeah.
This is happening in more places than just California. So as we look at these mandates that are being handed down, can we go into the Bible and make a solid case that it is actually against biblical standards and morality to follow that mandate? You have to make that decision for yourself on the mask thing in particular, because that's what the last podcast was about. We talked about how we are the light of the world, right? And our joy as Christians filled with the Holy Spirit is expressed from our face, right? This is where all of our emotion is seen. This is where our joy is expressed. Our expressions happen here. Now, who lights a lamp and puts a freaking cloth over it or puts it under a shelf to where it can't give any light? It can't give any joy to the world. Who does that? Nobody does that. We are the light of the world. And again, I think that we can pick this apart. And I feel confident, and maybe you guys don't. I feel confident about walking into an establishment and saying, wearing this face covering is totally against the way I believe as a Christian man. Mm-hmm. I feel confident that I can make a case against that. Well, has anybody assessed that for themselves? I mean, are you just pissed off? If you're just pissed off about having to do this particular thing, that's a totally different scenario than actually saying, okay, I have a case that this is stifling what God has asked me to do and be in my life here on earth.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I don't know about everywhere, but locally, that in the ordinance, it says if you have a bona fide, whatever that means, religious reason that you don't want to wear a mask, you don't have to wear it. So they're passing it down, introducing it under the guise of a medical preventative measure, but they still give the religious exemption, at least locally. That's probably not nationally, but
why you get so much pushback for, this view is because I also believe there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the reason that we are being compelled, forced to do these things.
Yeah.
My opinion on why that is happening is not for medical purposes. That happens to be what probably 80% of people think it is for. I don't think it's for that.
Why don't you just look at the science prior to all of this?
I mean, all I'm saying is, blind obedience to the government, to a state, has led to all of the major atrocities that have ever occurred on this planet. And it is always, I won't say always, nearly always a slow fade, a slow progression into that. It does not come all at once. It can, I'm not going to say it can't, but it rarely comes all at once because that increases the likelihood of a successful resistance being put up. A successful and violent, I will say, resistance being put up. So to avoid that, it is typically a slow progression of events, when I say the word logical, I don't mean this is a good thing or anything, but it's logical in how it is formulated and how it's set up to get you to the end goal, right?
Slow and bearable.
Slow and bearable. That's exactly right. It's painfully slow because it is micro adjustments into the end goal. Boy, they're patient. I'll give them that. I mean, it is always slow and well thought out.
I've heard it put, how do you boil a frog?
Yeah,
when you
exactly.
put a frog in a pot, if you cut the heat up, he's going to jump out.
That's the same. That's it. Because, like I said, it decreases the likelihood of a successful resistance being put up. So what ends up happening is you just have to watch when you can clearly see that a group of people are being labeled as and treated as the others. Okay? That happens every time this happens, every single time. And there are plenty of distinctions right now that you can see a group being the others and then the rest, everybody else. Okay? So whether that and just pay attention. That can be race. That's a big one. Everybody loves to worry about your skin color, hair color. I mean, it could be anything, right? It could be the color of your eyes. It could be your gender or your sex, biological sex. It could be the decision to put on a face covering or not. It could be all those things.
Anything that distinguishes you from somebody else.
And then once a group is labeled as the others, then they can be systematically isolated, right? It can be the deniance of refusal to enter a business, denied a service, okay? Which that makes life harder to live if you are the others. So then you have to move. You have to try to formulate a different society, or you are forced to move. And all I'm saying is that is the exact playbook that has been used over and over and over again. So you have to be mindful of that. I'm not telling you what to do about it, but if you not pay attention to that, it will happen very slowly and it'll happen under your nose. And it will be helped along by other people, other citizens, right? Because it cannot be done solely, but once again, that if it was just, your authority figures, a resistance could be. So that's my rant.
No, you're exactly right. I just listened to a podcast the other day with a former Navy SEAL that was born and raised in I want to say it was Poland, and actually saw the rise of a socialist or communist government within his own nation during his childhood and teenage years. And it's exactly the playbook Noah's talking about. He essentially said the government will create so many laws and mandates that they can, if there's someone in the society that's causing a problem, They can get you, me, they can get anyone they want on some kind of charge. There are so many mandates that if you're causing problems, they can come and get you and lock you away on something.
And we have to be real careful is when it takes citizen cooperation. It takes you telling on your neighbor for not,
for meeting,
right,
for praise and
for meeting and having a gathering where you pray and talk about, So that type of citizenry cooperation based on adherence to the state, which Romans 13 is not talking about. It's not talking about that kind of adherence that goes against God's word, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where that discernment comes in play, because if you take that verse to mean obey whatever the government tells me to do, then you will, and people think this is like extreme or, oh, you don't get it, this stuff is easy to do, and it's not, they're not telling me to do something crazy. It does not happen at once. And that's what you have to know. It does not happen at once. They're not going to overnight start telling you to do something that you think is crazy. It'll get to that over time. So if you're not paying attention to how it could get there or how it is rolling out, then it'll roll up on you real quick.
And that's the bigger picture. I would argue that what they're telling us to do is crazy, but it's simple to obey it. It would be simple to put on a mask. That's not hard. They're cheap. Buy you a whole pack of them and put them on. That's simple.
Double mask.
Yeah, double mask. Fashion and protection. It's simple.
Get your vaccine.
Not to meet it as the body of Christ. Just stay at home. That's fine. It's probably actually easier, but it's crazy. So the things that they're asking us to do are crazy in the sense that they are extreme as it pertains to the Bible, but they're simple things to do. And I think that's what you're saying, where people get hung up. It's like, just do it, man. I mean, just someone's asking you to do it. It's easier just to go ahead and do it. Look how simple this is.
So look, guys, if you're listening to this, I'm sure you've heard similar conversations on other podcasts where what makes this conversation different is we are trying to come at this from a biblical perspective, okay? I would encourage you to try to do the same thing. You read the same Bible. If you're listening to this, you read the same Bible that I have sitting right here beside me. I would encourage you to search your Bible, search your heart about these things that we are up against. And why is this even important? Why shouldn't we just lay down as Christians and say, oh, it's all going to end anyways? We know the God's word tells us it's all going to end anyways. We might as well just be silent and just carry on, right? No. Hey guys, I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, I don't care when it's going to end. I don't try to predict when all this is going to be over. I don't try to look, as long as I am alive and on the earth, I am going to be pushing forward and taking ground in the name of Jesus. And my ultimate goal with obviously the help Jesus empowering me and leading me and me following him, my ultimate goal is to change the world, to literally change the culture, and to take massive ground in the name of Jesus. Now, he has to make that happen. I have to do the work that he gives me, but he has to send the work my way, and I have to do the work he gives me. But I'm just here to tell you, how many brothers and sisters do you know that just sit back on the couch and say, "Oh man, this is the end times"?
Well, let me let me do a little bit of a call out session here, because How many times have y'all heard?
Man, we already did the call out. You gonna call out again?
Listen, if I'm about to talk, you just need to listen. How many times have y'all heard somebody say, "Oh, just live it out in front of them. You know, just be a Christian." That don't work. Like, if you really be a Christian, that works. But what people are saying is, just go take care of you and be a Christian. What did Jesus tell the disciples when he sent them out? He told them to go preach. He didn't say, go into these towns and just live it out in front of them, and they'll come around. Sometimes that may work. That's a good example to set. But it's the whole faith without works thing. You show your faith through works. That's what living it out is. It's not just going on willy-nilly. I'm going to obey the commands as good as I can, and I'm going to pay my tithes, and I'm going to do this and that. What works are you doing? Because just being a Christian and living up to as good a standard as you can, don't cut it.
What I want to say too, you mentioned, people who sit back because we're in the end times. The funny part about that is, I guess this isn't common knowledge. I've found that out over the times, but over the course of my life. But does anybody know? Yes, we are in the end times, right? That's a factual statement. But so was a second, the moment that Jesus left this earth.
Yep.
Right? That's when the end times started.
The latter days.
That started the latter days. So, yeah, are we closer than we were then? Well, yeah, right, time has passed, but we're no more in the end times than they were 10 minutes after he left the earth.
Yep.
So, and the word then was, he is coming again. It is close. He is near. It's been 2,000 years, right? So, but he is near. My point is yes, we are in the end times, but it may still be a while, right? And whether it's 10 minutes or another 1,000 years, if you lay back, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Move with a purpose. Have some urgency about yourself.
That's it, man. I'm going to go ahead and tell y'all, if y'all didn't recognize this yet, none of us that contribute to the 3 of 7 podcast are pacifists. I am not a freaking pacifist. I am here to take ground.
Yeah.
All right? Nor was Jesus a pacifist. He could show deep love and companionship with the worst sinners of his time, prostitutes, corrupt tax collectors. These are the people he spent the most time with. But on the next, in the next chapter, he's in the temple, flipping tables over, and telling people to get out. Y'all are a bunch of turds. Get out of here. Mm-hmm. All right. So we need to have both those dynamics within ourselves. Right? I'm strong on the exhortation side.
That's the CWV, guys, the Chad Wright version.
Yeah. My wife is the more priestly type. She's really, really great at showing that love and compassion to the people of the world that are extremely lost. I'm working to kind of merge and be a little more like Jesus, right? Yeah. A little more like Jesus, all right?
You got to have both places, like you said, you can go. Mm-hmm. You got to, there's time for both.
Yeah. So, well, guys, we'll cap it off right there. I think that's a lot for listeners to chew on. We covered a lot of ground, went a lot of places I didn't think that we were going to go in this podcast. So, I just want you guys to reach back out to us. Call us out, man. Yeah, look, we have these conversations not to make anyone angry, not to stir up any kind of strife. We have these conversations because we think that these are important conversations, and we want to hear what you think about it. All right? And so I would ask you to give us some feedback, help us grow. And if you thought any portion of this conversation was valuable, I would ask you to please share it with someone.
Yeah.
Whether that's on social media, whether it's sharing it with someone that you meet in your workplace today, whatever it may be, I would ask you to please share it with someone.
Yeah. And when you're going to call people out, what we're doing here, it may not sound in a loving tone, but it's out of love for our brothers that we don't want to be astray.
Yeah.
Right? So when you're calling people out, if you just disagree with us and you want to rant about it, I'll be honest, I don't really care to hear from you. But if you got something that you're going to say,
us grow.
Hey guys, I think you might have got a little bit off. Because anytime you're going to put yourself in the arena, you're going to put yourself out there, there's going to be people that disagree with you. And that's fine. If you want to say it, I mean, send it. I don't care. I just ain't going to read it. But if it's out of love, I want to hear it.
100%.
I want to get better.
Yep. You got anything else, Chili?
That's it, man.
All right, guys. This is the 3-7 podcast. Enough said.